Hey up everybody, welcome back to the Audi Cycling YouTube channel, where today I'm going to be doing a preview of the VELOGAMES Tour of Pologne. Some stylists still haven't been fully confirmed, which is why I've held off just a little bit, but we can't really put it off any longer, so let's go and dive into the riders and discuss who are going to be the best riders to be putting on. João Almeida, who has won this race in the past, is the most expensive rider at 24, which does make sense when you consider that he'll likely be competing in 3, possibly 4 stages, depending on how hard one of the stages is raced. So Almeida does make quite a lot of sense as a very safe pick, but I personally think that the best team at the end of this, or the best potential team that could be made, will likely not include Almeida, just because at 24 credits that's an awful lot to be spending on a rider who, let's face it, is, although one of the favourites to win, isn't like out and out like a Pogacar or a Vingegaard or a Remco or something like that. So I feel like 24 is quite expensive perhaps for Almeida, and there could be better value lower down, especially somewhere between 10 to 14 credits. There's loads of good riders there. Geraint Thomas never really does that well in stage races. After all, he does really good in these kind of latter years of his career. He kind of does like what Froome did back in the day, which is that he really does well just in the Grand Tours. He prepares just for them. So I think that G likely won't do that much, despite the fact that the parcours does suit him. And there's also plenty of riders on the Ineos Grenadiers who will also be up there for GC, who we'll get onto in a little bit. One of those riders could be Thymen Arensman. He did good in this race last year, finished quite high up in GC, but it's a different kind of parcours this year, and I just think that it suits a rider who's got a bit more punch perhaps. It's not quite the diesel climbs that Arensman is really good for. Even though there is a TT, which will certainly help him out, I just think that Arensman at 18 is still quite expensive to be putting on, especially when you consider that there's maybe like a Kwiatkowski who could be a better option. So Arensman is a better choice than G, but he's still not absolutely amazing. Higuita is punchier than Arensman, but he lacks the time trial, so therefore you won't be getting as many end of tour points, because at the end of the day a 17k pretty flat individual time trial is going to very much decide what GC is going to look like. So I think that Higuita probably isn't the greatest choice unless you really need him for a Gregario pick or something like that. Olav Koy is the most expensive sprinter and makes quite a lot of sense. He's quite good at climbing as well, so maybe he could compete in more stages, which could be quite important, because as a sprinter you will compete in stages 1, stage 4 and stage 7, and you might compete in stage 5 depending on how hard it's raced. Sprinters do make it around this lap circuit. It's only a shallow gradient climb, but there are some difficult climbs before then, so it's hard to tell whether Olav Koy will survive, but he is quite good at climbing, so therefore I think that he might survive that stage. So sprinters on the whole will compete in 3, possibly 4 stages. So if you can pick a sprinter who's a little bit more versatile, that will be a better choice, and I think that Koy is that. And I think that he is probably one of the safest and fastest sprinters in the field. Sivakov I think will just be a domestique. Bahrain haven't done a press release yet for Pologne yet, as the time of this recording, but they have Caruso, but they also have Mohoric in here as well, so it's kind of hard to tell who they're going to go for. I think that Mohoric makes the most sense as somebody who's come off the tour with a stage win. He looks in really good form there, and like I said, he's got a good punch, so I reckon that he will be competitive on some of these uphill finishes as well. Caruso on the other hand, kind of like Arensman, is a bit more of a diesel and will do well over kind of like Grand Tours, but I'm not really sure about his ability over this stage race. I think maybe even a sprinter could be a better choice than him. Gaviria, probably not. I think that Gaviria is probably not the greatest choice. Kwiatkowski, on the other hand, has looked fantastic at the Tour de France, won at the Grand Colombier. He's the Polish time trial champion at the moment, and on home soil, I think that Kwiatkowski could do a very good job. So at the moment, he is provisionally in my team, and I do think that Kwiatkowski is quite a safe choice at 14, so I'm going to probably recommend to be putting him in your teams, especially since he's got a good punch as well, so he'll be able to maybe compete for bonus seconds. We've also got Tim Merlier, who is probably another one of the fastest sprinters in the race, alongside Sam Bennett. I think that both of these are good choices, considering that I don't think I have them on my Gregario list, so it could be a good opportunity to pick them up. But I think they are also taking part in the what was the Benelux Tour later on, so there's also another opportunity there for you to pick those guys up. But they'll likely be competing with Koy for those sprint victories, so you could pick all 3 and just pretty much secure yourself a lot of sprint victories there. Dunbar, actually his TT was really good in the Giro, so he could be a pretty decent choice. So I won't write off Dunbar. I think that he is a pretty safe choice. Tobias Foss, another strong choice because good time trial, fairly punchy, good at climbing. He should be finishing inside the top 10. Guerrero will just be a domestique, I think. Kemna's another interesting one. I think he's warming up for the Vuelta. So I'm not too sure. His TTing hasn't looked fantastic, and his climbing probably won't see him winning any stages, and there's not really any breakaway stages. So I'm not sure about Kemna, to be honest with you. I do think that perhaps going with a sprinter like a Bennett or a Milan could be a safer choice, or even Mohoric. There's also Lenny Martinez, who, kind of like Higuita, doesn't really have the best TT. Michael will be a domestique. I think McNulty's an interesting one alongside Almeida. I think that McNulty's a very strong time trialist, and I do think that he could finish top 10. A little bit more of a differential pick. He could be a domestique, so it's a little bit of a risk, but I'm perhaps willing to take that risk. And you're seeing the number of quality of high quality riders in kind of a 10 to 14 bracket that I mentioned earlier. There's loads of riders in here. Milan, very strong sprinter, could certainly pick up a stage or two. But he is competing with Coy, Bennett and Merlier, of course. Mohoric, as I mentioned earlier. Max Poole, I would love to recommend because he is a rider from Yorkshire, but his TT isn't that great, and therefore he will only really be picking up points in 2 stages, and he's up against some very strong competition, so I can't highly recommend that you put him on, to be honest. Cabrera's an interesting one, strong time trialist again. That's going to be that's a key theme. If you're going to pick a GC rider, make sure they have a good TT, because you need those extra points and those end of tour points as well. Cabrera sometimes can be bothered to climb, but something like Tour de Suisse, which I think he did, he didn't really do anything there. So it's kind of hard to tell if he's going to be a good choice or not. He might just be working for Dunbar. Tayson, another sprinter. Ackerman, another sprinter. All these sprinters are much of a muchness. You can pick the ones which you like the look of, but of course Coy, Bennett and Merlier will be the fastest ones. Van Wilder, very strong performance in GC at the Volta Algarve earlier this year, and that was a very sort of similar profile to what this is like. He's a strong time trialist too, so therefore I think that Van Wilder at 10 is good value. Vauquelin similarly, although he hasn't had quite the form that he had earlier on in this season, so Vauquelin's got a little bit of a question mark, but he is going to the Vuelta, so you would expect him to be in some decent form at this point in his kind of warm-up cycle. So therefore, I think that Vauquelin is a good choice, but maybe a little bit risky. Getting into the 8 credit riders, you've got some kind of lesser sprinters like an Aini Oloski in here, or an Arvid van Klein. You've also got Bissiger, who is a pretty strong choice for the TT win if you want, again, that Gregario win. Bissiger could be a good one to be going with. But there's also Rune Hederhot, who almost won a stage of the Dauphiné. He's actually not that bad at climbing if you look back to Volta Algarve, but I do think that he will struggle on the climbs. But again, a good TT, but probably quite a risk at 8 credits to be putting on. It's likely safer to go with another sprinter like a Moschetti. Oldani, it's hard to tell. They've also got Marechko here and Tamino, so I don't know who they're going to be sprinting for. Only another option for DSM in terms of GC, but again, he's not that great at time trialling, so probably not the greatest. Hugo Page, I think he'll just be leading out Gerben Tayson. Aquilon, I'm not sure if he's getting his own sprinting or if he's leading out somebody. Paul Penoe, another sprinter, but not the fastest one, but could certainly pick up some top 5s. Gleb, Seilitzer, another sprinter. Marlene van den Berg, another sprinter. You're seeing a big theme here. It's hard to tell kind of these ones apart. They could finish inside the top 10, they could finish outside the top 10. It's just hard to tell who's going to be good and who's not going to be that great. Outside of them, into the 6 credit riders, Catania maybe as a strong time trialist. He finished second in the Italian time trial championships, so certainly worthwhile mentioning, but I think he'll be working for Van Wilder. Decker as a good sprinter. He finished second in a sprint in the Giro d'Italia before he left the race, so 6 credit sprinter, not too bad. Paul Double as a GC option, not a bad choice. Finn Fisher Black is developing into a good rider, but I think he'll just be a domestique here. Godon's a good kind of sprinter as well. Kim Hajduk sometimes sprints too for Ineos, and he will likely be sprinting considering that they don't have anybody else. Milan Menton's quite a good one because he's more of a versatile sprinter, so maybe he survives that stage 5 to finish inside the top 10 quite a few times. Michels will be a domestique. Monique possibly as a GC option, but like I said, there's so many different options here that it's hard to tell who I'll go with. Taberi, I know he killed a cat, and I know that puts a bit of a bad taste in people's mouth, but he could be a decent option, so it's just worthwhile mentioning. And then Leonard van Eetvelt is looking pretty good. He's a strong strong climber, strong guy for the future. Maybe this might be a bit too hard for him, but worth mentioning anyway. And Casper van Uden will be the sprinter for DSM, which I read on their press release. So definitely watch out for that, because that's going to impact a rider who I'm going to be mentioning in a minute. Moving into the 4 credit riders, not too many to be shouting about, to be honest with you. Mark Donovan, actually, I think he's just recently won the Sibui Tour, so he's obviously, or maybe he came second place, I can't remember, but Mark Donovan is in good form, and I do think that despite the bad time trialling, he could finish top 20, so that's not too bad, to be honest. I think that that's probably one of the safer ones to be going with. And then outside of him, there really aren't too many. Tobias Lund Andersen will be one which everybody is screaming at the screens, but of course he will likely be leading out a Casper van Uden if the DSM press release is anything to go by. But Tobias Lund Andersen is an incredibly strong sprinter. If you haven't heard of him, which I don't blame you for, he in the Tour of Norway sort of had a bit of a breakout performance where I think he won a stage. He's just this like 1m80 plus, like 1m85 Danish sprinter. Like, he's an absolute star of the future, and it wouldn't surprise me if he actually got his own opportunity and they swapped around Van Uden and Anderson. So definitely worth one kind of putting a little bit of a banker on for sure. Blake Quick is a little bit of a safer option. Jaco do say that he is going to be the designated sprinter for them, but like I've said, there have been so many sprinters that I've said throughout this preview that will Blake Quick even crack the top 10? I reckon he might do once or twice, but he is a bit of a safer choice because he is the designated sprinter, unlike Anderson, who will likely be on lead-out duty. Callum Scottson will probably finish top 20 GC because he's a decent climber and he's a decent time trialist too. Yanis Voisard will also probably do quite good in GC, and he might finish inside the top 20. And Ziegler does a good TT, but over a prologue, so I'm not sure if he'll do a good one in this race. This is the team that I've got right now. You'll notice the lack of Almeida. I've gone with quite a stacked field in terms of guys between 10 to 14 credits. I'm just not sure about Almeida, to be honest with you. Although yes, he is the favourite. I just think that he is a very I think there is better choices, although there were some good kind of 6 and 4 credit riders for you to go with as well if you did want Almeida. But let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below in terms of the Tour of Pologne. There will of course be a Classic at San Sebastian video up today as well. And all that is left to say is to stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video. Salut!